Hello, and welcome back to another update as we cover the latest developments and changes throughout the front line. We start out in direction of Avdiivka, where we see a lot of heavy fighting in this area. Over the past few days, there's been a lot of rain, which has made it difficult for any side to launch any operations, but we're still seeing some targeted bombardment of Ukrainian positions around Avdiivka whenever the sky clears up for but a moment, and we see a lot of positional fighting in the northern part specifically, where both the Russian forces try to pressure the Ukrainian forces here in the north by the coke plant, and the Ukrainian forces try to counterattack in the north of Krasnohorivka as they try to push the Russian forces back and dispel their foothold here by the railways, which they're using to prepare attacks against the coke plant here to the north of Avdiivka. To talk about the importance of the coke plant, we need to talk about the supply routes in and out of Avdiivka. To cover that topic, there is this great Twitter thread by John Helen. He says he saw someone else do this and then decided to do something more intricate. And of this, we're seeing this map right here. As is shown, we see that there are multiple roads in and out, and they're classed in different manners. First off, we have these orange ones, which are the paved roads, which are prepared for essentially holding anything, as the Ukrainian forces will have a much easier time supplying Avdiivka through these roads. Then there's the brown ones, which are, well, he shows it later on in this thread. As we see in this video here, there's no paved, it's just mud. And with the rain, it is very difficult to drive through. There is still some vehicles that are able to drive through despite this much water and mud. And that is because it hasn't been used as much yet. When the fighting goes on for a couple more weeks, if not months, then this becomes much more difficult for anyone to drive through, and most vehicles will end up getting stuck because the more that they drive, the more deeper it becomes, and as such it is more difficult to drive through and avoid getting stuck. We're already seeing cars and trucks getting stuck, as well as armored vehicles, but some of these are able to drive through nonetheless, as we see in this video. This is already turning out to be yet another Bakhmut, with the supply roads being the target of the Russian forces. So we're seeing that through this picture here with the supply roads, we can see that the coke plant here in the northern parts of Avdiivka, if this is taken by the Russian forces, it cuts off essentially every single except one road in and out of Avdiivka. As with the Russians control the coke plant, they'll be able to have physical control over 3 out of 5 roads in and out of the city. The fourth one here cuts off just before the city, and they would have to drive through the fields, which is even more difficult than these roads, which are filled with mud already. And then the final one is this one between Sheverne and Avdiivka, which yet again is a muddy road, not a paved one, and as such it is difficult to drive through. And at the same time, the Russian positions in the southern parts will allow them to have direct fire control over it. So the Russian forces essentially just need to take the coke plant, and they will have a operational encirclement of Avdiivka. If they take Sheverne as well, they will have a full encirclement of Avdiivka. So this is the current situation. So despite the Russian forces hardly advancing, the parts that they have advanced through is the most important ones, and we are lacking just one major area, which will become very difficult for the Russian forces to capture. But if they do manage to do so, whether it be by assault squads or simply storming it with an armored column, whichever strategy they decide to use, they'll be in a situation where they'll be able to physically cut off essentially all roads in and out of Avdiivka with just a muddy road under direct fire by Russian forces, which will make it a very tough battle for the Ukrainians to fight with hardly any supplies in and out of the city. There's of course the tunnels that we have to take into consideration as well. There's no map of the tunnels, so that is not something that we can come with any definitive conclusions on, but what we do know is that the Ukrainians have built tunnels over the past few years, and as such they have an extensive tunnel network under Avdiivka, which could possibly provide enough supplies for a potential siege of the Russian forces towards the city. So this means that the Russian forces essentially need to do something similar to what they did in Bakhmut to capture Avdiivka, and that is to take the city physically, similar to when they were fighting in Bakhmut, where they started out in the eastern parts of the city, and then they moved from the north and the southern parts, and then moved westwards after taking the center. So in this scenario, we would see something akin to the assaults here in the north to cut off the roads on top, and then they'll be able to move southwards from the northern direction and northwards from the southern directions, and then a storm here from the east from Kamyanka towards the east of the city, and finally combine this with an attack on the Avdiivka citadel area here in the west. So essentially an attack from all sides. This, however, is very difficult for the Russian forces to pull off, as the Ukrainian forces again has this as the most fortified city in the whole war, and as such they are very well prepared for Russian fighting, and we're seeing that despite heavy bombardment of Russian forces, they're still able to withstand all of that and hold the Russians back. Mostly, despite fighting for now 3 weeks, the Russian forces have not managed to capture much more than what we see here highlighted on the screen. However, that will likely change. As we see here, the weather in Avdiivka is becoming sunny until Friday, and then we have Saturday and Sunday as well predicted to be sunny. This allows the Russian Air Force and drones to fly more extensively, similar to the Ukrainian forces, but the Russian forces have that much of an advantage in the sense that the Russians have more planes. They have developed glide bombs, which allows the planes to attack and bombard Ukrainian positions outside of the range of the targets they have. And then we have this report from a Ukrainian soldier who has relations with other Ukrainian soldiers fighting in Avdiivka. According to him and his report, Avdiivka is a matter of time. Many of my friends from there are already in hospitals and have already gotten in touch. They are constantly ironing out positions with planes, artillery, and everything heavy that they have. Their losses are large, but this does not stop them. We need to fill everything with concrete and make more fortifications near Konstantinivka. A second soldier says, I was in the second rotation near Bakhmut, but Avdiivka, especially in the morning of the 10th, it was something out of a fantasy movie about a black hole. People only saw such terrible shit on February 24th. With this information, we see that the fighting in Avdiivka, although it is the most fortified city in Ukraine, it is also the one where the Russian forces are using the most firepower. The amount of losses here reported by both sides is astronomical compared to the amount of time they have fought here. Comparing this with other fights in Ukraine, the only ones that have been similar is the Battle of Bakhmut, which was called the Meat Grinder, and this is now the Meat Grinder 2.0. Moving on, we have a small development in the direction of the Kharkiv-Luhansk border, where according to Deep State Map, we see here that they report that most of this area to the west of the Serbets River has been captured by the Ukrainian forces. However, this has not been reported by Syriac maps yet, so I'm not changing my map until that happens. But essentially, there is this report here, and we have to take that into account. The Ukrainian forces continues to pressure the Russian forces here to the west of the Serbets River, try to get rid of their foothold across it. The Serbets River runs here from the direction of Serhivka, behind it through Kovalivka and down south to Novovodiane and down to Makiivka. We've already seen some fights by the Russian forces in the direction of Makiivka, trying to match the front line with the Serbets River that goes all the way down south to Sarishne and Torske here in the southeast of Liman. And that is all for this update. Thank you all for watching and have a great day.